So welcome to whatever you want to call this. it's, it's not a podcast. It's not TV. I guess
Uh,
it's probably TV light. I'm Randy Moss. This
Jerry
Jerry
Bailey,
Bailey, of course.
he's in
We,
Minnesota. I'm in
yeah,
Florida. He's not.
yeah. I'm a little jealous. He's got the palm trees behind him. It's not too bad here in Minnesota. We were planning, obviously, initially to be part of a telecast for the Louisiana Derby, the Florida Derby, at Santa Anita for the Santa Anita Derby, then for the Arkansas Derby. But obviously, because of the virus, we have been asked not to travel, and we're not complaining about that whatsoever. So we've been kind of on lockdown, just like everybody else, and we thought this might be a fun way to give us a chance to still talk about what's going on. So in the meantime, how's social distancing going for you and the Bailey family?
So I've been on pretty much self-imposed lockdown. I was traveling, and I got back on the 7th of March. And other than going to the grocery store twice within that first few days, I've pretty much been on lockdown. My wife and I, my son's working from home for almost 2 weeks now. I did play a couple rounds of golf on the 9th and 10th of March, but then after that, no golf, which might bother me more than anything.
You're not shaking. You're not having withdrawal symptoms. That's amazing.
So yeah, I got great weather down here, and you know, it's a lot of family time for us. So it's actually good. What about you?
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably impacted my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, more than anybody else. She's a senior in high school, and they had to cancel their senior spring break trip to Cancun. My wife was going to go along as what my daughter hoped would be an invisible chaperone, but that got canceled. Now she's concerned about graduation party, which has been planned since starting last fall. It's a big thing up here. Prom, graduation itself. As far as me, I mean, this is nothing for me. I mean, social distancing. I mean, it's a lot easier to social distance when you're antisocial to begin with, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I practically invented social distancing. I should be out there as a consultant on social distancing. I could be making some money out of this, but I've just been on lockdown like everybody else.
Yeah. Hey, listen, it's totally a different way of life right now, but I think we can hold our breath for that long. However long it ends up being, we can live with it. It's a good place to be if we have to isolate.
Especially when you have palm trees in your background. Now, as we speak, as we record this on Thursday, the Florida Derby is still planning to go on as scheduled on Saturday. Santa Anita is running without fans in the grandstand. So is Oaklawn Park. So are some other racetracks. What are your thoughts? Because some people are confused about this. They don't understand why basketball shuts down, why baseball shuts down, why horse racing is still going on. What are your thoughts about horse racing continuing during this viral outbreak?
Well, I've got mixed emotions about it. You and I have talked about this at length, and we both agreed that the horses need to be taken care of. They need to be fed every day, multiple times a day. They need to be cared for. They need to be exercised. You can't just keep a horse in a stall day after day after day and not let him out. So you need the appropriate amount of people there to do those jobs, to feed them, to take care of them, to exercise them. And that's probably the harder part of it. To lead them over in the afternoon and run them is probably the easier of the two scenarios. The biggest difficulty would be keeping the jockeys healthy, because and as a jockey, there's 30 or 40 of us in the jocks room, and at any 8-foot area there could be 4 of us. Our lockers are very close to each other. You came up with a great idea about getting an RV for each individual jockey, even if it took 20 or 25, 30 RVs.
Sure.
Each jockey have his own quote unquote jockey's quarters RV. Now, nobody took because I passed that message on, by the way, and no track took that.
People don't listen to me. Yeah, don't worry about that. Go ahead.
But that would be the biggest fear, because once it gets into a jockey's room, either a valet getting infected, or a jockey, or any other attendants in that jockey's room, then it would have to quickly spread through there. I mean, we just found out today that Javier Castellano, one of the leading riders every year, came up positive.
So how do you think, now we had a chance to talk to Javier on the phone. Interesting thing. I mean, Gulfstream was testing they just instituted a policy where they're testing jockeys for the virus that rode out of town over the last couple of weeks, let's say.
Right.
So they tested 7 of them. Javier had gone to Oaklawn Park and it had 2 mounts there on Rebel Day. That's the 14th of March. Came back on the 15th, had 2 mounts at Gulfstream,
Right.
and then flew home to visit his family
To New York.
in New York. He said he personally counted only 20 people on the airplane. The airport was virtually deserted. When he got to New York, he went to his doctor. His doctor had him tested, and he's the only one of the 7 that turned up positive.
Yes, the protocol now in place, according to Mike Lakow, general manager there at Gulfstream Park, said that they have tightened it up. They have changed it, which makes sense. And apparently, a couple of weeks ago, it was just taking a temperature. But now anybody that had ridden out of town prior to Sunday was subject to go to their own physician, be examined, and if necessary, take a test. So as you said, 7 riders went to be tested. Javier's the only one that came back positive. He says he feels great. I was talking to him. Multiple sources have told me that he's running every day, at least the last 2 days, which indicates that by all outward appearances, he feels well at this point.
And those protocols that you talked about, they really apply only to the riders that are currently at Gulfstream Park. Lakow told us that Gulfstream's been contacted by a lot of riders who had been riding elsewhere. Aqueduct has now suspended its operations. Kentucky is still kind of up in the air. Turfway just stopped. And they wanted to come down to Florida to ride at Gulfstream, and Gulfstream's policy is no. No riders from out of town are allowed to come in and compete at Gulfstream Park.
Again, according to Mike Lakow, they have done their best to social distance these riders using additional space at Gulfstream Park since there's no fans allowed in. There's a big trainer's lounge, which is probably about 800 square feet in size, and they've spread the jockeys around in there, along with the original jockeys room. So they're doing their best to keep these riders separated to the degree that they can. But it would be a concern for me if I were still riding, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see how this impacts racing going forward. It's a concern because I've been saying, and you've been saying the same thing now for weeks, that the real critical juncture is going to come when or if jockeys begin to test positive. And now we've had the first one.
Well, we've had a valet at the fairgrounds tested positive, and now we've had a jockey at Gulfstream test positive. But to your point about the racetracks and what they're doing, Keeneland decided not to run their meet. Maryland tracks are shut down. New York's shut down. I think I counted 6 or 7 tracks operating right now. The major ones would be Gulfstream. They would be Oaklawn Park. Fairgrounds stopped running just a week early. Santa Anita's still running, and there are a couple of minor racetracks. Fauner Park, I believe.
Tampa is still running, I believe.
Tampa's running, yeah. Thanks. So that's the update.
All right, Castellano was supposed to ride Candy Tycoon in the Florida Derby, so that's obviously not going to happen. I guess we should transition now and talk about the race on Saturday, which has obviously changed a little bit in terms of its premier status as a Kentucky Derby prep. I've had a lot of questions as to, wow, this makes the Florida Derby not as important. Maybe not in the whole scheme of being the final Derby prep, but the Florida Derby is a prestigious race in its own right, as are the Santa Anita Derby and the Arkansas Derby. They're a worthy goal for horses. It's good for their stud value. A lot of money is at stake. First year, $750,000. So it's still a big race. Why don't we start off? We don't usually start off talking about this particular topic. I think, we haven't talked about this, I think the pace scenario in this race changed potentially dramatically with the post position draw. And I know you're thinking the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ete Indian again drew the outside post. He drew the 10 post in the Fountain of Youth, and now he's even further out in post number 12. He used his speed, his early speed, leaving the gate that day in the Fountain of Youth to clear the field going into the first turn. Very aggressive move by his jockey, Florent Giroux. And it worked. He cleared the field, got over without much trouble, was able to relax after that, though they did go a very honest pace and just destroyed that field. He's going to have to almost certainly do the same thing, but he's got a little tougher field to deal with this time, Randy.
Well, here's where I think the post position draw is even more important, okay? Looking at the race, I think there are only 2 other horses that have the capability of going with Ete Indian early. They drew posts 1 and 2. As Seen on TV has the rail with Paco Lopez. Then you got Chivalry just to his outside, but Chivalry has blinkers off, which is is probably an insight into what trainer Ralph Nix is thinking about whether he wants Chivalry on the lead or not. I just exchanged texts with Kelly Breen, the trainer of As Seen on TV out of Post 1. He said, we really have no choice. He said, we've got to go, leaving the gate. And he said, it's going to be interesting to see what develops the pace scenario. I think it's more likely now that As Seen on TV makes the early lead, and Ete Indian, if they both break well, is forced to sort of rate just behind and outside him. But the pace could be pretty fast.
I will agree with almost everything you said. I just don't see the amount of speed from number 2, Chivalry, especially with blinkers off. But the inside horse, As Seen on TV,
Right.
if he breaks well, certainly he's got to go. Ete Indian, even though he does go, as you said, I believe from watching his run that he can then, his jockey, Florent Giroux, can then throttle him back off As Seen on TV's early pace, but not far off. I mean, I'm talking half a length, maybe 3/4 of a length, because there's a couple of other horses in there in the middle, Tiz the Law and Independence Hall, who both have pretty tactical speed. I don't think they'll be sent by any means, but I think they'll be up there forcing Ete Indian to use a little bit more of the early gas that he has. So I agree. As Seen on TV, Ete Indian going into the first turn with Tiz the Law,
Independence Hall. Yeah.
right in behind those horses.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about Tiz the Law. We haven't released any of our, because we haven't been on TV. We haven't had our top 5 or anything like that. I don't know for sure. I probably would have had Tiz the Law number 1, even after Nadal's Rebel, even after Authentic in his wins with Bob Baffert in California. I was that impressed with Tiz the Law's win in the Holy Bull. What's your opinion on it?
I agree, and we're going to show you in just a little bit why we're impressed, because what he went through in that race. But I've got him number 1, which makes, to your point about the importance of the Florida Derby, they got, in my opinion, the number 1 contender for 3-year-old of the in 2020. I would have to go with Baffert after that, Authentic and Nadal in some order.
Charlatan.
Charlatan, yeah, you don't know about him, inexperienced, but he won't be by the time the Derby runs. And then you have Honor AP, who was just second to Nadal. I mean, I'm sorry, not to Nadal, to Authentic.
Right.
In California. And then you have Ete Indian. Let's see if he can match up his Fountain of Youth with another big performance. So those are kind of my 5, 6 leading into this weekend.
And after that, it kind of drops off. Same with me. All right, Holy Bull. What are your thoughts on the way Tiz the Law ran in the Holy Bull?
Tiz the Law has had some small issue in almost every one of his races as soon as the gate opens. A little stumble, broken a tangle, but he still managed to break really well and get a forward position. He's got early speed if they choose to use it. However, in the Holy Bull, he led into the first turn, and then his jockey Manny Franco tried to ease him back, and then it got to be let's grab you back, and then it got to be an all-out tug of war, and he had to snatch him up at the 6 furlong pole to get him back off the top 3 so he could get that outside stalking trip. To his credit, Tiz the Law said, okay, I'll do this. And then Franco let him go, and he rushed up, to challenge Ete Indian, and then went on, even though he lugged in a little through the stretch, to be very impressive. So a lot of good things by Tiz the Law.
Yeah, he's actually lugged in through the stretch in all 3 and all of his races, pretty much, except Churchill. I don't think he lugged in necessarily at Churchill because he was on the rail, right on the rail to begin with. But typically, I mean, you say, okay, he lugs in, that's not good. But typically when he lugs in is when he's already gone past the horse in front and he's pulled away, and it's almost like he's bored or something, and he's just kind of messing around.
Well, I talked to Barclay Tagg earlier today, his trainer, Tiz the Law's trainer, and he said he thinks that it's when he gets in front, the crowd noise bothers him. Well, he won't have any problem this weekend because there is no crowd.
And Michael Trombetta is saying that's also an advantage for Independence Hall, who tends to get a little riled up in the paddock. With nobody in the paddock, maybe that won't be the case. You talked about Independence Hall and his tactical speed. One thing that we saw in the Sam Davis, I thought he had an absolutely perfect trip, but he was pulling. he was really pulling Jose Ortiz. I mean, he was sitting back there in third, but he was, I don't want to say ranked, but he was very keen. He took a really hard hold. And I think that tells you right there, number one, he has to settle a little more if he's going to run longer distances. And number two, it's going to be hard to get him back off of the pace at all in the Florida Derby. So I think we can expect him to be up there close.
I do. The Sam Davis, I've still got a question in my mind whether Independence Hall has distance limitations because he bottomed out, in the middle of the stretch, or maybe Jose thought he had more horse than he actually did and might have moved just a touch early. I texted Jose earlier and he just got back to me. He said he was working horses at a farm, wherever that was. So he's staying fit. But I wanted to ask him about that, if he thought he could wait on that move a little longer. We'll find out, I suppose.
Yeah, my take on that, I didn't think he asked him for a move. I mean, he had two horses in front of him. One's a sprinter, and the other was a horse that was a front runner from Woodbine. They engaged early. They set a pretty fast pace. They both were beaten almost 30 lengths. So I think by the time they got to the second turn, they were done. And basically Independence Hall just inherited the lead. Yeah, he just cruised up on the outside, inherited the lead. But yeah, Sole Volante just charged up on him at the top of the stretch. And I thought Independence Hall ran well, but he's going to have to run better than that, I think, if he's going to beat Tiz the Law.
Yeah, and Sole Volante is not a bad horse himself. He came back to be second in the Tampa Bay Derby, so some credentials there.
Okay. Ete Indian, if as seen on TV makes the lead, so you're not throwing in the towel on Ete Indian's chances in the Florida Derby just to sit second off of him and then run as well as he did, let's say, in the Fountain of Youth?
There's no way he's going to run as well. I think he sits second. I think he probably halfway relaxes, but he had no excuse in the Holy Bull. Tiz the Law is just a better horse than he was that day. Now, can Ete Indian, can he match up? Can he pair up big efforts, Fountain of Youth back into the Florida Derby? I'm not so sure about that. Right now, to me, he's not as good as Tiz the Law. So even if he runs great, I still don't see him beating Tiz the Law.
All right, let's give Gouverneur Morris a little love here, the Todd Pletcher trainee. He was prepped in an allowance race at Tampa Bay Downs. Todd likes to use Tampa for his 3-year-olds that are getting ready for the Kentucky Derby. He did it with Always Dreaming. He did it with Super Saver. Now he's done it in an allowance race with Gouverneur Morris. Here's my take on Gouverneur Morris. A lot of people are making a big deal out of the fact that in that allowance race, an Untitled, the horse trained, I don't know who has him now, Mark Cassey, was in front of him. And Gouverneur Morris was asked to pick it up at about, I'd say about the 3/8 pole with no response. And he was ridden pretty aggressively for about 1/8 of a mile with no response.
Right.
And Untitled, meanwhile, was just cruising on the front end. And it was only when they turned for home that Gouverneur Morris then really began to wear down Untitled and then drew off. That doesn't bother me, because if you go back and you look at Gouverneur Morris in the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland, you see shades of the same thing. At about the half-mile pole, he was being asked to pick it up and get in the race and was going nowhere, no response. I actually stopped watching him at that point in the Breeders' Futurity. I said, he's done. And then all of a sudden he makes this sweeping, really good move on the outside. And then, of course, Maxfield came in and hailed everybody around him. But that seems to be just the way Gouverneur Morris runs. You know more about this than anybody. I mean, some horses just need to be aggressively ridden.
Yeah, totally. And that's not an indication of his talent level. He's still very talented. What that does tell me as a rider, though, that he has no acceleration during the middle of a race, during the course of a race. It's hard for him to get going because you have to start asking him well before you really want that response. It's not going to come for a little while. So in a 12-horse field like we're going to have at Gulfstream Park in the Florida Derby on Saturday, if he gets in the middle of traffic and he has to maneuver through that, it makes it harder for his jockey, John Velasquez, to hit those holes when he wants to, because the holes have to stay open longer with a grinder, a plodding type horse like Gouverneur Morris. I'm not saying he's a plotter, but that's his style, is to just wind up and get a little at a time and slowly wind that engine up. So it just makes it harder for the rider to navigate through traffic. So he most likely will have to take an over route, a wide route around horses and lose some ground. And you have to just ask yourself, is he good enough to do that? I don't think he is in this particular case. Doesn't mean he's not talented. It just means his job is a little harder because of his style.
Yeah, and he's also got to improve a little bit on numbers. If you look at the various speed figures, he's not quite at the level of a couple of the other horses in there. So I like Tiz the Law. If you're playing exotics, to me, when you have a horse like It's Indian, that's going to have a different kind of trip, and you don't know exactly how he's going to handle it. To me, betting wise, you don't use him. I think, some of the other horses that we've talked about. I mean, I think Gouverneur Morris might be a play underneath in some of the exotics. Independence Hall, same thing. One long shot that I would throw in to your exactas and trifectas is Disc Jockey, trained by Saffie Joseph. His races aren't that bad when you go back and look at him. He's kind of a grinder. He didn't have that much acceleration either. But numbers-wise, those are some pretty good races he comes out of, his last two. And I think he could fit in here style-wise if the pace is fairly fast, and could clunk up from behind and can pick up some of the pieces maybe at 20 to 1 or so.
Some of the pieces. That's well said. I don't think he's going to challenge the first couple of horses. He would have to improve a lot, I would believe. I think he would have to improve 3 to 4 lengths. And maybe he can't.
To win, yeah.
Even to challenge the first two. But these 3-year-olds, they change from race to race a lot. We know that. I just haven't been privy to being able to go out and talk to his trainer and watch him train, because you can see that in 3-year-olds between races, how they train if they become more aggressive. So we've been limited on, you and I, on what we can see and what we can find out. So it's a guess.
All right. Anything else you want to say before I hit stop recording?
Well, usually on TV, we have commercials so we can scratch or get a drink. So I reached out and got a drink because it is about 85 degrees down here right now. I know you can put out the violin for me any second here.
Yeah, I feel real sorry for you there, Jer.
But this is new ground for us, and I hope it works out well because it's fun.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, when NBC found out about this, those of you watching this, however many of you there are, they also now want us to come back on and do this after the Florida Derby and analyze what happened in the Florida Derby. So you may be seeing more of us than you initially thought you would or want to.
Okay,
so that's what we're going to be doing.
So as Randy knows, I've had a Twitter account for about 6 years, and what have I sent? 20 tweets out in 6 years? So we're going to put it on not only YouTube, NBC, but Randy, you're going to throw it up on our YouTube for us?
Yep. NBC is going to, it's probably the best thing to do. We'll tweet links to it, but NBC Sports has its own YouTube page.
Right.
And that'll probably be the best place to find it other than our Twitter accounts. I started tweeting all of a sudden like crazy the last week or so. My son said, "Man, you must be really bored. You've never tweeted this much." That's probably true.
And I've broken down and opened a Facebook page.
Oh, so, my God.
The world's ending.
The world has stopped spinning. Facebook page for Jerry Bailey. Oh, my God.
Well, I'll probably throw it up on that too. But anyway, it's going to be on multiple platforms, but most visible would be the NBC YouTube, yes.
You're socially accelerating. You're not socially distancing. Look at you. Social media accelerating. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back with you after the Florida Derby. Take care.
Okay.